In this week's show of the Natural Animal Podcast, we are going to do a bit of a season recap. In case you don't know, this is the last episode in season 1 of the show. Hello. So we're going to do a bit of a season recap, then I'm going to open it up to listener Q&A. So I'm going to be answering questions on fasting, traveling with pets, feeding pets fish, and why some dogs go grey and others don't. That's a bit of a fun one. And then I'm going to finish with some tips for what you can do to keep yourselves entertained during the podcast break. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello. Welcome to episode 12. Is it episode 12? Yes, it's episode 12 of the Natural Animal Podcast, the final episode in season 1. I can't believe it. It's amazing that I've got this far. So good. I'm happy that you've been along for the ride. Perhaps you've only, dipped your toe in and listened to 1 or 2 episodes, or perhaps you are a loyal listener and you've listened to every episode. Thank you. Perhaps this is the first episode that you've listened to. Well, hello and welcome. I am your host, Ruth Hatton. I am an animal naturopath, an energy healer, an animal lover. I live on the sunny coast hinterland in heaven, in paradise. I love nature. I love herbs. I'm drinking a beautiful cup of ginger tea at the moment. I don't think I've done an episode about herbs yet. Save that for season 2. I have done an episode on aloe vera. It's actually was my least popular show. So it was I did that show to really kind of see whether people wanted that. And because if it's popular, then I'll continue to do shows like that. But what I might do in season 2 is actually do a more kind of general herbal episode for you, to talk to you about, how to use herbs and the benefits for herbs and all of that. And then from that, you might want to go deeper and explore herbs individually. But ginger, I take ginger because it's so good for the digestive system. It calms the gut, it's anti-inflammatory. It really just helps with getting the digestive system working. So it's kind of my go-to. I also take it, it's mostly just to have a good clean out in the morning and support my liver. Much better for you than drinking lemon juice. Lemon juice can destroy the enamel on your teeth, as it has with mine. Drink ginger. An Ayurvedic doctor told me that once. He's like, swap out that lemon and have ginger as your first drink in the morning. So little things like that. And obviously that's a bit more focused to, humans. But ginger is just as beneficial for your animals. Now, I didn't think I was going to get on here and talk about ginger. I do have a plan for today's episode. Basically, I've put out there a request for questions, and I've got a few that I've also been collecting over the season as well. So I'm going to answer those questions today. I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping, and I'm going to wrap things out by just talking about, what's next. Where to from here, as I just type a note because I want to mention that. So let's get into today's show. Speaking of previous episodes, so I wanted to do a bit of a season 1 recap first, and just to give you a bit of insight into what we've covered, what we've covered actually, because I do have guests on this show as well, and what's been the most popular episodes. Really interesting. So we have covered, I really want to do this in order. We have covered, I'm just looking at my analytics on my website, Spotify thing. So we started off with a hello and welcome. Then we did holistic animal care. Then we did serving animals and bearing witness. Then we did natural pet diets, a scientific exploration. Then we did why animals matter, exploring sentience. Then we did holistic kidney care for animals, healing trauma with companion animals, aloe vera for animals, returning home with interspecies communication, energy healing for animals, and last week, animal soul journeys. They are all the episodes we've done in season one. So, as you can see, we've covered a lot. And I'm so grateful for the beautiful guests that have joined me on the show this season. It has been an absolute pleasure and so enjoyable to chat to these amazing women and men and to be sharing their wisdom with you. So juicy. Do you want to know the top 3 episodes? I will tell you. The top 3 episodes are holistic animal care. That's like out and out, has been the most popular. So that tells me a lot. That tells me that you people are interested in learning more about holistic animal care, which is great because that's what I do. That's like the core of my work, holistic animal care. So thank you. The next popular was the Hello and Welcome, episode 1, probably because there was a bit of like fanfare around that. I did like a YouTube premiere for launching the podcast and extra promotion around that episode. But that's, close behind the holistic animal care. The third most popular was last week's episode, Animal Soul Journeys, which is interesting because that's a really long chat. That's like 2.5 hour episode. And I remember when I was starting the podcast, my sister was like, who's going to listen to episodes that long? I'm like, people do. I do. If I do, others do. It's about, it allows us to go really deep and to cover a lot of stuff. And we did that in Animal Soul Journeys. We've done that in all of the guest shows, but particularly that takes the record for the longest episode in season 1 is Animal Soul Journeys, and that was with the beautiful Claire Deal. Check her out. Check all of my guests out. They're amazing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have them on the show. I'm very particular about who I invite on the show. They've got to align with my values. It's got to be something that I know my audience is going to love. So your feedback is really, really important because I want to be able to create, this show is for you as much as it is for me, right? But I want to be able to create, a show for you that is providing you with interesting tidbits, that's providing you with value, that is allowing you to explore, allowing you to open your mind to new ways of thinking and being and living with animals, companion, farm, and wild. Right. So your feedback is really, really important. And I can get some feedback from looking at the analytics on the show, right? I know which episodes are the most popular, right? And as I do more and more seasons, that I'm going to start to notice more of a pattern. But a really great way to fast track that, because I don't want to get to season 5 before I figure out what do you guys want, right? So a really good way to fast track that is to let me know. On my website, there is a feedback form, and I link to that in the show notes of every single show. And on that feedback form, you can give me your suggestions for topics you would like me to cover. You can suggest guests that you'd love me to have on the show. You can ask questions for, any of the shows that have been on so far. You can ask me questions and I can use that in future episodes. So that's a really great way to let me know what you think of the show and what you would like the show to cover. So please go to the show notes or go to the podcast page on my website and scroll down and you'll see at the bottom it says, complete feedback form or something like that. And fill out that form. You can do that more than once. You can do it whenever an idea pops up into your head, right? It's better that you do that form than send me an email because that's my next preferred way of contact is email. But the feedback form, it has all of that feedback in one central place. I will lose things in my email because it's not necessarily going to be a subject line, podcast feedback. That's a good way if you want to send an email, write podcast feedback, because then when I'm searching that, I can find it. But the best way is the form, because that's tracked through my website, and I've got like this little portal where I can see all of the responses, all of the suggestions, all the feedback in one place. So that is the best way to let me know what you think of the show, what you want on the show. So there has been a ton of valuable information, I think, that has been shared in season 1. And it's all free. Like, I was looking at everything that I've covered, and it's like, you know what? This is kind of like a course in itself, and it is all free. It is all there, like hours and hours and hours and hours of content for you to access to really like get into animal magic, right? And free and valuable information. So I'm going to take this opportunity in episode 12 of season 1, the final episode of season 1, to ask for your support. How can you support the show? It's really quite simple. Make sure you're following or subscribing the show, whether that's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, YouTube, or you can also subscribe to the very old-fashioned way of RSS feed directly on my website, right? You can go to ruthhatton.com/podcast and you can see all the different ways that you can access the podcast. Click on that and follow/subscribe. That's one way of supporting the show. Another way of supporting the show is, depending on what platform it is, so if it's Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. Whether it's just a single episode or the whole season, now is a perfect time to think back over the season and go, oh, this has been so amazing, Ruth. Thank you so much. I particularly loved episode da-da-da-da. So review it. If you don't want to write words on Apple, you can just do a review with stars. Select those 5 stars for me. Boom, boom, boom. Because I don't think I've actually got any Apple reviews yet. So I would really love that. I get people telling me, oh my God, I love your show. It's amazing. But the reason why the reviews are really good is because Apple will then put the show out to more people. More people will see it, right? More people will get access to this free and valuable information and immerse in the world of animals, right? If you're on Spotify, I don't think you can review, but you can follow, and you can leave, there's a little prompt on each episode. What did you think of the show or this episode? So you can respond to that. You can give me your comments. You can pop your questions and things in there. That's a really lovely way to do it. I've had one person do that on one of the episodes. I think it was the energy healing one. Thank you. You know who you are. I'm going to actually send you an email soon. You can like it. You can, if you're watching on YouTube, put some comments in there. You can also subscribe. You can share it. Tell people, tell the world about the Natural Animal Podcast. Share it on Instagram, share it on Facebook, share it with your friends, colleagues, associates, family, anyone who you know who loves animals. Let them know this show exists for their benefit. So yes, many, many ways that you can support the show. No money necessary. Just your simple review, comment, like, follow, subscribe, share. Thank you in advance. I would really, really appreciate it. So we're going to move now into the Q&A portion, and I'd love to do these regularly on the show. So whenever there's a question that pops up into your head, jot it down, and you might want to save it up and put it into a feedback form. Or you might just send it every time something pops into your head. That's absolutely fine. But the questions that I'm going to answer today are, I'm going to tell you the questions first and then we're going to get into it. The first one is fasting, why it supports animal health and well-being, and how to introduce fasting, especially when you have a dog with a big appetite. The next one is tips and suggestions for traveling with pets. There was a question about energy healing. It was just a general talk about energy healing. I've already done that in episode 10. So you know who you are. If you're listening to this episode and you asked me that question, go and have a listen to episode 10. It's filled with so much information about energy healing. So that's the answer to that question. Done. And there's 2 more questions. Is feeding fish okay? Is tuna okay? If not eating meat, can we increase the fish? And the last question was about dogs aging. Why do some dogs get grey hairs and not others? So that's what we're going to talk about. They're the questions I'm going to answer. And we're going to start with fasting, big juicy one, because I love this topic. So the question was, Why does it support their health? And by there, she was talking about, pets, cats and dogs. Why does it support their health and well-being? How do we introduce fasting, especially when you have a dog with a big appetite? So fasting actually mimics the behaviors of animals in the wild. It is very, very natural for animals to fast. All the animals out there in the wild, they are fasting because food is not always available. That's one reason why they will fast. Another reason why animals will fast is because they're not feeling very well. They may not have the energy to catch any food or find any food. And also they know, instinctually know that when they're not eating, it allows their body to heal, regenerate, recover from illness, right? So pardon me. So there's that natural instinct to fast, and it might be like you see it, you will see it in cats and dogs. It's like, why has my dog stopped eating? They might not be feeling very well. And so there's that instinct. They're not going, oh my God, if I do this, my digestive system will rest, my body will just be able to focus on healing. It's just an instinct. They know it is the best thing for them, right? And it's innate knowing. And so when we incorporate fasting for our companion animals, we are allowing them to be the way that they are in nature, right? And I think I spoke about this quite a lot in episode 2, Holistic Animal Care, about supporting animals' natural ways of being, allowing them to exercise their natural behaviors, their natural instincts. And so fasting is a way that it does, like I said at the beginning of the answer, it mimics the behavior of animals in the wild. So in the wild, it is quite normal for wild animals to go without food for 1 to 2 days because there's nothing available or they might be unwell. And so that's just like, that's life. We're not eating today. We'll just take it easy because we're fasting, right? So there are many, many benefits to fasting. So it can be, I touched on this already, that it can be beneficial when an animal is sick. And in the wild, it's simply that, if an animal is sick, unless they've got a supportive pack, right, then they're not able to get food. So they're just going to sit and rest, or they may not feel like eating because they don't feel well, right? Fasting can cure some ailments alone by itself, just fasting by not eating, or combined with herbs, right? And so you might find in the wild that they're not eating any, they're not catching any prey or anything. And obviously not all wild animals are carnivores or omnivores. There's a lot of herbivores out there. So that, but they might be more specific and intentional around the particular plants that they eat. The pharmacognosy, like they know this is going to help me. This plant, this herb is going to help me right now because I don't feel very well. So I'm just going to eat this plant for the next day or two, right? That is a form of fasting. You can fast on just, a herb or a mushroom or something like that. There are many, many ways of fasting. It doesn't necessarily have to be starvation, right? And we'll speak about that. This really could have been a whole show on fasting. Brace yourselves, this could be a long one. So just checking my notes here. So fasting can cure some ailments. It's particularly beneficial where it can be particularly beneficial when there's diarrhea. Can be really helpful for worm infestations. But basically, I touched on this already. It allows the digestive system to rest, and the digestive system uses up a lot of the body's energy. So when the body doesn't need to digest anything, the body can focus on healing and repair, right? So that's why it can be helpful when there is illness. It rests the digestive system, as I said, so it allows for the removal of accumulated wastes. So, for example, toxins that are stored in the liver and in fat reserves. By fasting, your body gets the chance to actually release that, and that is so healing for the body. It allows for the repair and regeneration of injured tissues. Basically, it restores the natural balance of the body, and this can prevent chronic health problems. So it can help with healing, but also prevention of disease. It can prevent obesity, as fat reserves can be burnt up on fast days. And essentially, it can result in a fitter, brighter, more alert and happier. Well, I said brighter, but more alert, brighter, happier, fitter animal. So there's, a bunch of benefits around fasting. So that answers part of the question: why does it support pet health and well-being? So how often? You can start off with 1 day a month. You don't even have to do a whole day, and I'm talking about for your animals here, not for you. I mean, you can obviously do it for yourself, but I'm an animal naturopath, not a human naturopath. So you can start your animal off with a 1 day a month fast, and I'm going to take you through a process on how to do that. And then you could increase that to 1 day a week for adults, or it might be half a day. You can then do, if you've got puppies, a monthly 1 day fast from weaning up to 4 months old. Otherwise, whenever you feel that your animal could do with a boost, or they've got a health condition that would benefit from fasting. There are rules around when not to fast. So very elderly animals, probably not a good idea. Young growing puppies and kittens, they do need their nutrition. I'd probably only really do, again, we go back to what would they do in the wild. And yes, in the wild, if you think about wolves, their puppies would have fasted too. Like if there was no food available, no food for mum or dad or puppy, right? But it's kind of one of those gray areas, they do need their nutrition, they're growing, right? So puppies and kittens, a bit of caution around that. And also pregnant animals, they're growing dogs and cats, right? They need the nutrition, they need the energy so that they can grow healthy babies. Animals with kidney and liver problems should only be fasted under veterinary guidance. So, how to fast? Well, you can do intermittent fasting. So, basically, reducing the feeding window. Some of you might already be doing that, particularly if you have dogs and you're only feeding one meal a day. You're already fasting them. You've already got them on an intermittent fasting protocol, because that's all intermittent fasting is. It's reducing that feeding window. So, more time without eating, more hours that go by without eating than the hours that they're eating. So you might, you can do different types of feeding windows or intermittent fasting patterns. 8, 12, 6, 8, 12. No, that's only 20 hours. It's got to add up to 24 hours, right? Because there's 24 hours in a day. So you might do 16, 8. So there's an 8-hour feeding window and there's 16 hours when they're not eating anything. And most of that can be done, overnight. Like overnight, you are fasting. Your animal is fasting unless you're leaving treats out. And on that, I want to say that having food out all day is not a good idea. It is the opposite of fasting. They just get all this food whenever they want it. It's very unnatural. And this is often something that happens with cats. Like they have the free feeders, or they're feeding kibble. The humans are feeding their cats kibble, and there's just kibble out all day. Happens with dogs too. The kibble's just out all day. There's no opportunity for the animals to fast unless they're imposing that themselves. And it's kind of like, well, if there's food out, I'm going to eat it. It's like, for me, if like there's a plate of biscuits out, I'm going to eat the plate of biscuits. There are no biscuits in my house unless I have a craving for biscuits. And then I eat them all in one hit because I know I can't have them in my house. I have no self-control, right? So you can have cats and dogs like that are so food obsessed. If the food's there, they're going to eat it, even if they're not hungry. So, so extending out that feeding window, you can feed lighter or smaller meals. So you might not be extending the feeding window. You might have meals, and I used to do this with my greyhound. A couple of mornings a week, he would just have a fruit meal. On that note, there's certain breeds as well that really it's not ideal or a good idea to fast. Greyhounds are one of those breeds because they are prone to bloating. So it's good to feed smaller, frequent meals, right? So, my grey, he would have 5 mornings a week, he'd have his raw meaty bones. And then the other 2 mornings a week, he'd just have fruit, like a bowl of watermelon or, some papaya or some banana. He loved his fruit meals. So that was a way that he was still getting food, but it was very, very light. So 2 mornings a week, he was having very, very light meals. I would just fill his bowl with watermelon, put it out in the garden. He'd just sit there and yum, 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 love his watermelon, right? So that's what I said. It's like it doesn't have to be starvation. Like if you're struggling, if you have little self-control when your animal is like, feed me, try, or it's a good way to start it as well, as just, 1 or 2 meals a week, just make them smaller or lighter, right? You can also do like a liquid meal, which is obviously a lighter meal. So it might be 1 or 2 days a week. There's one of those meals that's just, you know, a broth, whether that's a vegetable broth, a meat broth, a bone broth, a stock, some kind of soupy thing, right? That's a type of fasting that is going to give your animal's digestive system a bit of rest. If you are wanting to do a monthly fast, I have a 3-stage approach. I did some research and I found this approach, and I was like, yes, that's a beautiful way to approach this. So stage one, if you gear up to that monthly day or 2 days of fasting, right? So you're going to start to reduce the amount of food, and also reduce the amount of richness of food. So smaller amounts of food, nothing too rich, include some vegetables. The vegetables should be either steamed or raw and pulverized. Don't just grate. We want to be breaking down everything. Best way to do that is in a food processor. You can also do it in a blender. Pulverize the hell out of those. Make it so these vegetables are like mashed. Obviously, there's vegetables that need to be cooked, like pumpkin, sweet potato, those tougher vegetables, they do need to be cooked, and then mash them too, right? So the smaller amounts of food, nothing too rich, include some vegetables. Do this for 2 to 3 days. That's stage one. Stage two, you move to liquid only, filtered water. But if your animal's kind of like begging and pleading, you just can't just do filtered water. Vegetable juice, broth. You can do like a weak fish broth for cats. You can also do a chicken broth and things like that. You can add some honey, healing honey, not, I almost said the brand then, not crap honey, real honey that hasn't been processed with heat, cold processed organic wild honey that doesn't have any additives in it. If you can stretch to Manuka honey, beautiful. But that's beautifully nutritional and healing, especially if your animal's a bit sick or a bit weak. That's just going to give them a bit of an energy boost by incorporating that honey in there. Garlic's another one really good one to incorporate in a fast. It's a natural disinfectant, so it's going to help just clean the body, right? And yes, garlic is safe. You're like, garlic? You're recommending garlic? Isn't garlic toxic? No, 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 no. There was one study on garlic, and it was a ridiculous study. And from that, there came this view that garlic is toxic. This study used a hell of amount of garlic. I think they fed like a whole bulb or even multiple bulbs, not a clove, like a whole bulb to like a dog or dogs. And hello, there were, digestive reactions. And they're like, oh, garlic is toxic. Fed in the right quantities and feeding fresh garlic, not garlic from a jar, is safe. You just got to get the right quantity. I don't know if I've got a blog post about that. And so I think I've definitely posted about it on Instagram. So go to my Instagram. If you're not following me there, follow me there. There's a link in the show notes to do that, at Ruth.animalnaturopath. So liquid only, 24 to 48 hours, whether that's filtered water, not tap water. This is a fast. We don't want chemicals, right? Never give your animals tap water. Always make sure it's filtered or spring, pure, clean water, right? As I said, you can use juices, broths, stocks, and things like that if your animal does need something, right? Add in a bit of honey, add in a bit of garlic, very, very small amount. Start with just the tiniest amount because the taste and the smell can be off-putting. Herbs can be very, very complimentary for a fast. I'm not going to tell you which ones because I don't know your animal. You're more than welcome to book in a consult with me and we can work out a beautiful healing protocol incorporating fasting and herbs and all the wonderful things. Aloe vera can also be really helpful, and I did a whole episode on aloe vera. Check it out. It's my least popular show. There's so much good stuff in there. Let's get that. Let's move aloe vera up in the popularity stakes. Stage 1 is reintroduction. So you're slowly going to reintroduce solid food, small amounts at first, and slowly increasing that over 2 to 3 days until they're back to their normal diet. So a month, that's a monthly fast, right? So you're feeding first 2 to 3 days, you're reducing the food. Then you're doing liquid only for 24 to 48 hours, and then reintroduction over 2 to 3 days, you're slowly reintroducing food, normal quantities, richer, normal foods that's part of their normal healthy diet. So I think that answers the fasting question. So the dog with the big appetite, yeah, I would just approach it like, like I said, like it doesn't have to be a full-on fast, right? You can just do with lighter meals, intermittent fasting, shorter feeding windows. And then if you want to try your hand at doing a monthly fast, try it. If it fails, at least you've tried, It might not be right for your dog or your cat, okay? Caution on cats. Definitely do not do anything longer than 48 hours because they can really suffer badly. They can get like a fatty liver disease situation going on, okay? Also, actually, keep your animals inside during a fast because they could sneak out and go hunting, okay? Find other food sources and then they're not really fasting and you're getting all worked up about it and for no reason, right? So the next question I'm going to answer is tips and suggestions for traveling with pets. Now, I remember when this question came to me, it was actually more about overseas travel. So I will talk about shorter journeys, but I do want to talk about overseas travel first. Now, my immediate response to that was avoid it if you can. But I know I am a realist. I know there are occasions like you might need to relocate overseas or interstate, and I don't want you to leave your animals behind. But taking your animals overseas may not be the best thing for them, and they actually may not want to do it. So how do you know that? Okay, well, this brings in communication. Talking to them through the whole process. They're part of your family. So just like you're going to tell your family, we're moving overseas or we're moving interstate, tell your animals too. They deserve to know. They're gonna know, right? They're gonna feel it. They're gonna notice. They're gonna know there's a change. Any change in routine is going to be a stressor for them. So communicate. You might want to even hire an animal communicator. That would be a really good idea, actually. I wish when I moved from Sydney to Brisbane, actually, I moved from Brisbane to Sydney, and then I moved back from Sydney to Brisbane. But the Sydney to Brisbane, I think when I moved from Brisbane to Sydney, I drove. I can't even remember how I got my animals there. Such a long time ago. But I know when we came back, I had 3 cats then, and we all went on the plane, and it was awful. Like, I would never, ever do it again. I would just not move. I'd be like, job opportunity overseas? Sorry, I can't. I have cats. But I appreciate not everyone's me, and you may not really, it could be a partner, and, so I hear you. I hear you. I'm just letting you know this is me, honest. I'm always going to tell you what I think, right? I'm not going to jazz it all up for you. I'm literally going to tell, this is my opinion. You've asked my opinion. This is my opinion. But then say, well, if you are going to do it, do this. Think about doing this, right? So that's the purpose of this right now. Hire an animal communicator, letting the animal know this is what's going to happen. This is what's in the works. This is what we're planning. Get the animal communicator to ask how the animal feels about it. Are they okay with this? Do they want to go? Would they rather have a new home found for them? What things can you do to support them on this journey? Really, really useful. And there's, I've had 2 podcast episodes with animal communicators, Jenny Madison and Claire Deal, both amazing, check them out. Then on the journey, familiarity is really important. Familiar smells. I wouldn't use any new scents because they could have a reaction. So if you're thinking about, you might want to put in a little cotton wool ball with like some essential oils or something. Don't do that for the first time on the trip, because what if they have a negative reaction, right? So, I would be I would be incorporating that, like calming essential oils, lavender, everyone knows lavender, right? And start that. And that's also going to assist with managing the stress before the move, the preparations for the move. So really it's planning, think ahead. What can I do? If you want more support with this whole process, we can have a consult, right? I can guide you through what to do. I can, make up a special blend of essential oils. So familiar smells, familiar items. So they'll be, if they're on a plane, they'll be in a cage. Put their toys in their favorite toys in there, their blankets, some of your clothing, things that smell like you. That's all going to help them to feel comfortable. They're like known factors, right? Going overseas in a plane, that is like, what the hell is this situation? It's so foreign to them, right? It's so unnatural for them. So giving them that familiar sense, things, that's going to help them to feel safe and secure, right? Speaking of safe and secure, it made me think I have a a flower essence blend called Safe and Secure. It's actually for animals who have separation anxiety. But that brings me to my next thing. Flower essences can be a beautiful way of supporting your animal with when they're traveling, in the lead up to and after the journey. Obviously, if you're even during the journey, what you can do, obviously, you're not going to be there in the cargo. I know I have people who listen to me in America. You're very lucky. You can take your animals in the passenger part of the plane. But when flying from Australia, we've got to put them in the cargo, which is just horrible, right? So if that's a situation, maybe you're listening to this and that's changed. And now you can book a seat, and your animal's sitting right next to you. Amazing. Still going to be stressful for your animal, but you can still do all the things that I mentioned, right? So if they're going into a cargo or they're going anywhere on that journey where you don't have access to give them the flower essences, you can put the bottle into the cage with them. Flower essences are an energetic vibrational medicine. So even though they're not taking it or having it applied to their coat, there's still the energy in that bottle. So you can do that. I do have a number of so safe and secure is separation anxiety. So this definitely could be applicable for this travel situation. But I've also got my general relaxing, calming one called, Serenity. And I also make bespoke flower elixirs, so personalized. So I can pop in there things that are indicated for travel, for being alone, from being away from the family, right? So that can be very supportive. Practically, if it is overseas, book the most direct flight with the shortest layover that you can. Minimize the time of that journey. Try to avoid countries where you'll need to put your animals in quarantine. I know that may be impossible depending on where you're relocating to, particularly if it's for a job and you're being sent there, right? If quarantine is necessarily, obviously regular visits to see them, still those familiar scents and items and foods, make sure they've got all of that. Repeat everything you did in preparation for and during the flight when they're in quarantine. And communicate with them as well. Now for sure, so that's like the overseas travel or those longer trips. For the shorter trips or in the car, still communicate, still calming scents, still can use flower essences, still can use, I didn't even mention herbs. Herbs are beautiful. A lot of the times with travel sickness, ginger is amazing because it's anti-nausea. I actually make a travel specific herbal blend. I don't know if it's on my website, but I do have it. If you want to get access to that for your animal, if you know that, yes, they do struggle with travel, hit me up, send me an email, ruth@ruthhatton.com, or just go to my website and go to the contact page and contact me via there and say, Ruth, I want your travel herbal. If it's not on the shop and my website, ginger is in that. So yeah, communicate, calming scents, herbs, flower essences, regular breaks during those shorter trips for them to get out, stretch the legs, or they might be longer trips but still in a car. Um, have someone sit in the back with them if you can, play relaxing music, no like hardcore dush, 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 or death music happening. That's not peaceful, right? Peaceful environment, relaxing energy, relaxing environment. If your animal is particularly disturbed by travel, energy healing may be beneficial to resolve any associated past trauma or traumas with travel. I've done quite a lot of those types of healings. So that's my answer to tips and suggestions for traveling with pets. The next one is feeding fish. Is it okay? Is tuna okay? If not feeding meat, can we increase the fish? So fish is a beautifully healthy food for dogs and cats. It's a good source of protein, and certain species have very, very high quantities of omega-3 fatty acids, and these are important, essential to include in your animal's diet, right? But there are precautions that are important to be aware of. The first is wild versus farmed. You want to buy wild caught fish rather than farmed fish. Now, why? Well, I'm going to tell you. Wild caught fish or wild raised fish, they live and they just live out their normal lives in their natural habitats, right? They eat their natural diet specific to their environment. They have a higher nutritional value due to eating the natural diverse diet of kelp, algae, seaweed, smaller fish. So fish can be very rich in vitamins A, D, and B2, and most important is the omega-3 fatty acids that I mentioned. You know, especially for brain, eye, heart, and immune health, skin health, and they're anti-inflammatory, right? We live in a pro-inflammatory world. Everything is inflammatory. So, omega-3, beautiful for any inflammation, any inflammatory condition for the body. I would generally, whenever I'm working one-on-one with clients and the animal has an inflammatory condition, omega-3 is always there, supplementing in addition to dietary, right? Because we need more omega-3. We need, inflammatory condition. There's too much inflammation. So we need to counteract that with anti-inflammatory. So anti-inflammatory foods, anti-inflammatory supplements, hello, omega-3. Omega-3 is highest in cold water fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, lake trout, and herring. Salmon is good, but most salmon is farmed, not wild. I remember we want to choose wild rather than farmed. But there is a problem, and we're going to talk about the problems associated with farmed fish in a moment, but there is a problem with, everyone going out and wanting wild fish. There's an increased demand for wild fish, and that can result in overfishing, right? So it's not just the people who is asking for wild fish. The farmed fish industries are feeding wild fish to the farmed fish. And so there's this what can happen is there's just too much fishing, right? And also bycatch. So bycatch is when they've got their big fishing nets and they're catching fish that they're not intending to catch, and other creatures, not just fish. They're getting caught in the fishing nets and they're either killed or discarded, like thrown back in the ocean after being traumatized, being caught in a massive net, because that's not what they're, fishing for that day, right? So overfishing and bycatch, big, big, big problem with fishing. Okay. There are also like hatcheries, and these are where this is kind of like man-made fish, basically. The fish are spawned and hatched and raised in a fish farm environment, and then they're sent to other fish farms or released to the wild, right? To supplement depleted supplies because because of overfishing, there is a shortage of fish, right? And so now there's this whole, fish hatcheries thinking, oh, well, we can help with the depleted supplies by breeding more fish and putting them into the wild. That might sound great, but that's results in an unnatural increase in numbers. It's not nature. The fish aren't arising from they're not naturally produced populations, right? And also they compete with the fish that are there for habitat and for food. So there's a lot of ethical problems with fish as well as health. But for me, I can't talk about animals without talking about the ethical aspect of it. And so you're always going to get that from me. It's not, for me, it's not just about health. Is this healthy for your dog or cat? It's like, well, hello, what about these animals? What about the ethics and the morality of it, right? Another problem, or what, the problem, or another problem just with fish generally, is contamination. So mercury is a big one. Most people know of that, I think, and generally going to see this with larger, older fish more than your smaller fish. That's why I always say if you are feeding fish, stick with the smaller fish like the sardines, the herring, and the mackerel, because they're likely to be less contaminated with mercury. But I hear that is changing, and now we're starting to see smaller fish becoming similarly contaminated with mercury. So with the why larger older fish? Well, they're accumulating the mercury from the smaller fish that they eat. Like they're older, they've been there for longer, right? More chance to accumulate these toxins, right? So when I talk about these larger older fish, we're talking about things like swordfish, shark, king mackerel, orange ruffy tailfish, fresh and frozen tuna. These generally have the highest accumulation of mercury and pose the most risk for your pet and for you. Okay to feed in moderation, like once a month, because your animal will be able to deal with that. Unless they're really, really sick, then you don't, and they're on strict instructions, low toxin exposure, then I wouldn't even be feeding it at all. However, just on tuna, there's some research that points to skipjack tuna being lower in mercury than other tuna species. I generally say to avoid tuna. But if that's the only kind of like fish your animal likes, and they do like it, then go with the skipjack. Other problems with just fish generally is radiation, more so in the Pacific Ocean, where we've got things like Fukushima, where there's been those nuclear disasters and there's still radiation in the oceans. So that's kind of like the issues that are, go wild, but there are precautions still with wild fish, depending on the locality, contamination, things like that. I want to talk a bit about farmed fish and why I don't recommend farmed fish. It's akin to factory farming, for pigs, chickens, what have you. So antibiotics are used because you've got lots of fish in a condensed, closed environment. This breeds disease, and so they're given antibiotics to prevent disease amongst this group of confined fish. Poor diet. They're not eating their natural diet. It's very much like, mostly it's kind of like little grain pellets that are made of like fish meals, grains, and fish oils. So remember when I said that sometimes, the fish that are caught are used to feed farmed fish? They make these little pellets, right? But they might even, I don't know for sure, don't quote me on this, they might even put those fish that they didn't intend to catch, like the bycatch, and chuck that to the factory farmed fish, right? So in those pellets, they're also often used genetically modified feed, monocrops like soy, corn, and canola, which are commonly genetically modified. What's wrong with genetically modified foods? Lots of food sensitivities and inflammation can actually result from eating genetically modified foods. Can also result in toxicity of the liver and the kidney and the pancreas. It can damage the reproductive system. It can damage the immune system. I should do a whole show just on GM foods, right? Salmon can be genetically modified, and apparently it's not labeled. This is going to depend on the different country that you live in terms of the labeling requirements when it comes to GM. So it's best to check that. What does your country require? Because you might be able to buy salmon that clearly says it's non-genetically modified. And just because there's not a requirement on a labeling requirement, there can be really ethical companies that will still put that information on there. You just got to do a bit of checks because there can be misleading advertising, right? Another situation with the factory farmed animals is they are in a very restricted environment. They have restricted movement. The fats in their diet are imbalanced. So they're probably getting a lot more of your 6 and 9 omegas than your 3, and your 6 and 9 are pro-inflammatory. There are other toxins as well, like PCBs and dioxins and insecticides. Now, these are chemicals from farming that are found in some fish species. So it's not just mercury radiation, it's also PCBs, dioxins, insecticides. You're going to get insecticides when you think about, well, how is this different if I'm feeding factory farmed animals? It's not, it's the same. Antibiotics, insecticides, all the other chemicals used in farming, right? Unnatural diets, those problems are the same, right? So summary of that is it's okay to feed fish, but usually no more than 10% of the diet, and stick to the smaller fish, herring, sardines, mackerel, and ones that are grown, ones that are sourced from the wild rather than farmed fish. So I think that answers that question. And my last question is kind of a fun one. Dogs and aging. Why do some dogs get grey hairs and not others? Well, I just want to say, it's like humans. Not every human gets grey hair. Humans that are blessed with really good genes might go through all their life and never get grey hair. Amazing, jealous, right? But as dogs get older, and even some cats, but I do think, I didn't do any research about cats, but I think it's more common with dogs. If you know the answer, let me know. But as dogs get older, it's common for them to lose the pigment in their fur, just like we lose the pigments in our hairs, right? With dogs, you just generally looking at the hair on their face, the facial hair is generally where you will see little greys crop up. But and there can be some particular breeds that are more prone to having grey hair. Weimaraners, poodles, collies, sheepdogs, greyhounds, schnauzers. Like schnauzers, they always got grey hair, right? But even your mixed breed dogs can still have grey hair because they can inherit the gene from a purebred ancestor, right? So it is a genetic thing, and even perfectly healthy dogs can get grey hair. Younger dogs can get grey hair. And there's been some research around that psychological stress is a factor. So there could be a genetic predisposition, but it could also be a result of psychological stress. You hear about these people that just wake up one day and all of a sudden they have a head full of white hair, right? Because they've gone through this crazy, stressful, traumatic period in their life. Same thing, right? With dogs. So there was a study of 400 dogs, 1 to 4 years of age, and they were assessing, it was via surveys, right? And they were assessing fear, anxiety, and impulsivity. And they found that dogs under 5 with premature grey hair may be linked to psychological stress. Fear is more likely to result in a grey muzzle, and female dogs showed higher levels of grey hair than males. This could be related to hormones, could be also related to the theory that females get more anxious than males. When you look in the human world, I think a lot of the time it's just females, we feel, right? I mean, males feel too, right? But it's easier and more natural for us to display our feelings, whereas males can hide it. So I don't know if that's necessarily that females get more anxious. I think the males get more anxious too, but they can just bury it down, right? That's just a theory that went along with this research, right? So there you go. That's the answer to that question. So they're all the questions that I chose to answer on this week, the final episode for season 1 only. It's not the final episode of the show, just final episode of season 1. So we're taking a break now. I don't know how long the break's going to be. I'm going to feel into that and see how I go. I'm kind of thinking around the 4 to 6 week mark. So you might be thinking, what am I going to do in the meantime? Well, have you listened to every episode? If not, go back and listen to those episodes you haven't listened to. There might be episodes that you want to re-listen to, because you're going to pick up things that you didn't pick up the first time round. You could write a review. Fill out the feedback form a few times as ideas pop into your head with your suggestions for topics, speakers, questions, things like that. If you really want more information, sign up to my newsletter on my website. There's a link to do that below. Join the Animal Lovers Tribe. I share information through there, through email. If you want more regular information, make sure you follow me on Instagram, ruth.animalnaturopath. What else? You might want to do a course or get an ebook. I have a whole library, a holistic animal wellness library, and a lot of it is actually, I've reduced the prices, like my real food diet for ebooks. I've dropped them by $10. There's a bunch of courses on there. There's a bunch of masterclasses on there. I've got a whole blog. There is not a shortage of information. Head to my website, ruthhatton.com. There's so much that you can still tap into, even, while the podcast is on a break. I'll pop the link to the Holistic Animal Wellness Library into the show notes too. But you can find it quite easily. Just go to my website because there's a banner at the top that mentions it and you just click on and get it. So that's everything. This is the final episode for season 1. Thank you so much for listening to, whether it's just this episode or a couple of other episodes, or extra thanks if you've listened to every single episode. I love you so much. Thank you so much for your support, because I just make these shows and I don't necessarily know, except for the occasional person that will let me know. But yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Big love. Oh, I will say another way, you can book in a consult with me. I think I've actually said that twice already on this show. Sorry, this is not intended to be a big sales pitch, but you can do that if you've been thinking about it. If you actually want that one-to-one personalized support with me, whether that's naturopathic, whether that's behavioral, emotional, whether that's energy healing, go have a look on my website, or, book in for an initial chat with me. It's, no obligation, free, complimentary, no money changes hands. It's just an exchange of time and chatting, and we can work out what's going to be the most supportive thing for your animal. Thank you so much. Sending you lots of pink and gold, loving vibrational energies your way. And I'm sure, reach out, say hello, join the tribe, follow me on Instagram, send me a DM, fill out the feedback form, all the things. Thank you. And I will, if I don't hear from you in the interim or whatever, I'll see you in season 2. Bye.